The Crimean War, a conflict that raged from October 1853 to February 1856, was a pivotal moment in 19th century European history. It pitted the Russian Empire against an alliance of the Ottoman Empire, France, Britain and Sardinia-Piedmont. As I delve into this complex and often misunderstood war, I'm struck by how it reshaped the balance of power in Europe and foreshadowed the conflicts that would define the latter half of the century. At its core, the war was about the decline of the Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe. Russia, ever ambitious, saw an opportunity to expand its influence southwards, while Britain and France were determined to maintain the Ottoman Empire as a buffer against Russian expansion. It's fascinating to consider how these geopolitical calculations led to a war that would claim hundreds of thousands of lives. France takes Algeria from Turkey, and almost every year England annexes another Indian principality. None of this disturbs the balance of power, but when Russia occupies Moldavia and Wallachia, albeit only temporarily, that disturbs the balance of power. The roots of the Crimean War lie in what historians call the Eastern Question, the diplomatic and political problems posed by the decline of the Ottoman Empire. Russia, under Tsar Nicholas I, saw itself as the protector of Orthodox Christians within the Ottoman Empire. This religious dimension added complexity to an already volatile situation. The Tsar's ambitions were not merely religious, however. Russia had been expanding southwards for centuries, seeking warm water ports and greater influence in the Black Sea region. Britain and France, on the other hand, were deeply suspicious of Russian expansion. They feared that a Russian-controlled Constantinople would threaten their interests in the Mediterranean and, in Britain's case, the route to India. It's a classic case of great power politics, with each nation jockeying for position and influence. The irony, of course, is that in trying to prevent Russian dominance, Britain and France ended up hastening the decline of the Ottoman Empire they sought to prop up. What's particularly interesting to me is how the Crimean War marked a shift in the European balance of power. The concert of Europe, which had maintained peace since the end of the Napoleonic Wars, was effectively shattered. Russia, which had been seen as the dominant land power in Europe, was revealed to be technologically backward and administratively incompetent. This revelation would have far-reaching consequences, not least in spurring on Russian reforms in the following decades. We cannot deceive ourselves any longer. We must say that we are both weaker and poorer than the first-class powers, and furthermore poorer not only in material terms but in mental resources, especially in matters of administration. The immediate cause of the Crimean War was, rather surprisingly, a dispute over the custody of holy places in Palestine. France, under Napoleon III, asserted the rights of Catholic monks, while Russia championed the cause of the Orthodox Church. It seems almost absurd that such a relatively minor issue could lead to a major European war, but it speaks to the tensions that had been simmering for decades. The situation escalated rapidly in 1853. Tsar Nicholas I, believing that the other European powers would not interfere, sent troops into the Danubian principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia, then under Ottoman suzerainty. This move was ostensibly to protect Orthodox Christians, but it was clearly a step towards further Russian expansion. The Tsar, I believe, gravely miscalculated the reaction of the other European powers, particularly Britain. The British, led by Lord Palmerston, saw the Russian move as a threat to the balance of power in Europe. Palmerston, a figure I find fascinating for his mix of liberalism and imperialism, was determined to check Russian expansion. The French, eager to restore their prestige after the humiliations of the Napoleonic Wars, were quick to join the British in supporting the Ottoman Empire. The stage was thus set for a major European conflict, one that would be fought not just in Crimea, but across a wide swathe of territory from the Baltic to the Caucasus. All that we hear about the decay of the Turkish Empire and its being a dead body or a sapless trunk and so forth is pure and unadulterated nonsense. The Crimean War began in earnest with the Ottoman declaration of war against Russia in October 1853. The initial fighting took place along the Danube, where the Ottomans, led by Omar Pasha, put up a surprisingly strong defence. This phase of the war is often overlooked, but it's crucial to understanding how the conflict developed. The Russian failure to make quick progress along the Danube was a significant factor in the decision of Britain and France to intervene more directly. The war took a decisive turn with the Allied landing in Crimea in September 1854. The decision to attack Russia's main naval base at Sevastopol was a bold one, and it led to what is perhaps the most famous phase of the war, the Siege of Sevastopol. This siege, which lasted for nearly a year, was a brutal affair. The conditions were appalling, with disease claiming far more lives than combat. It's here that figures like Florence Nightingale came to prominence, revolutionising military nursing and bringing the realities of war to the attention of the British public. One of the most famous, or perhaps infamous, episodes of the war was the charge of the Light Brigade during the Battle of Balaclava. This ill-fated cavalry charge, immortalised by Tennyson's poem, has come to symbolise both the bravery of the British soldiers and the incompetence of their commanders. It's a stark reminder of how outdated tactics and poor communication could lead to disaster in the face of modern weaponry. The war saw the first use of technologies like railways and telegraphs in warfare, heralding a new era of industrialised conflict. The Crimean War ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1856. On the surface, it appeared to be a victory for the Allies. Russia was forced to give up its claims to protect Orthodox Christians in the Ottoman Empire, and the Black Sea was neutralised. However, the long-term consequences of the war were far more complex. The Ottoman Empire, despite being on the winning side, was significantly weakened. The exposure of its reliance on European powers ultimately hastened its decline. For Russia, the war was a humiliating defeat that exposed the backwardness of its military and administration. This led to a period of reform under Tsar Alexander II, including the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. It's fascinating to consider how the shock of defeat in the Crimea contributed to significant social changes within Russia. The war also marked the end of the Concert of Europe, the system that had maintained peace on the continent since the Napoleonic Wars. Perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of the Crimean War was the reshaping of the European balance of power. France emerged as the preeminent power on the continent, a position it would hold until the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Britain, while maintaining its naval supremacy, found itself increasingly isolated diplomatically. The war also sowed the seeds of future conflicts in the Balkans, as the weakening of both Russia and the Ottoman Empire created a power vacuum in the region. In many ways, the Crimean War set the stage for the alliance systems and tensions that would eventually lead to the First World War. The Crimean War remained as a classic example of how governments may plunge into war, how strong ambassadors may mislead weak prime ministers, how the public may be worked up into a facile fury, and how the achievements of the war may crumble to nothing. The Crimean War left an indelible mark on European history and culture. It was one of the first wars to be extensively documented by photographers and war correspondents, bringing the realities of conflict to the public in unprecedented ways. The reports of William Howard Russell for the Times newspaper and the photographs of Roger Fenton created a new level of public engagement with war. This had profound implications for how governments conducted foreign policy and how the public perceived military conflicts. The war also had significant technological impacts. It saw the first use of railways and telegraphs in warfare, heralding the age of industrial warfare that would reach its terrible apotheosis in the First World War. The inadequacies of military organisation and medical care exposed during the conflict led to significant reforms, particularly in Britain. The establishment of the Victoria Cross as the highest military decoration for valour was another lasting legacy of the war. As I reflect on the Crimean War, I'm struck by its relevance to contemporary geopolitics. The issues it raised, the balance of power in Europe, Russia's relationship with the West, the fate of the Ottoman Empire's former territories, continue to resonate today. The war serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of miscalculation in international relations and the unpredictable consequences of military interventions. It also reminds us of the human cost of great power rivalries, a lesson that sadly seems to need constant relearning. Victory in this war did not bring any significant material gain, not even a war indemnity. On the other hand, the Ottoman treasury was nearly bankrupted due to war expenses. In conclusion, the Crimean War was a complex conflict with far-reaching consequences. It marked the end of one era in European diplomacy and the beginning of another. Its effects were felt not just in the realms of international relations and military affairs, but in medicine, technology, and public perception of war. As we continue to grapple with issues of power, intervention, and international cooperation, the lessons of the Crimean War remain as relevant as ever. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of this pivotal moment in history. If you found this video informative, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Your support really does make a difference. And do let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like me to cover in future videos.